It is exactly 6 minutes to the top of the hour. Welcome back to Sunday Live here at Citizen Television. Now, women constitute more than 65% of the informal workforce. However, their work remains largely invisible, unrewarded, undervalued, and unrecognized.
Well, Mary Morkey's earlier story showed us the precarious nature of their work, including the lack of social protection and labor protection, decent wages, unsafe working environments, and increases their risk to human rights violations, including sexual violence, as seen in tea farms, for instance. Well, how can we ensure women have an equal right to work free from violence and harm? Well, joining us in studio to unpack this is Blandina Bobson, Director of Programs at Oxfam International Kenya. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Blandina, real quick, have we seen the numbers of GBV incidents rising in the last few years? Because I know during COVID, when people were stuck at home, those numbers spiked. Is that still going up?
It's still going on. Nothing has changed. There hasn't been any improvements, mostly because there isn't much investment towards preventing, gender-based violence. So post-COVID, people are still in recovery mode, and so there haven't been much that different stakeholders are doing to reduce this. So the numbers are still going up. And with the current, climate instigated disasters like floods and drought, it's even getting worse, especially in the arid and semi-arid counties of Kenya.
And we're talking about making workplaces safer and, ensuring decent work for women. When we talk about that and putting a gender lens on it, how do we make it a human right, if you will, for workplaces?
So they say women's rights are human rights. They're not just women's rights. And this is one of the basic fundamental obligation of different stakeholders to be able to meet. We don't separate it from human rights. Unfortunately, for most of the employers, they look at it as an additional cost. Companies would ask for a business case to be able to invest in initiatives that, are geared towards achieving gender equality. But you don't need a business case to, comply or, to be able to uphold human rights. And so it's very important that it is approached as a human rights issue and not just a women's rights issue. Yeah.
But Blandina, it's not rocket science that women's rights should be human rights. What is it about us? What is it that we don't, or we ignore it, or we push it to the back burner, or what is it? We don't give it that prominence that it deserves.
Because we don't value the work that women do. If we did value the work that women do in different spaces, and more specifically within the informal sectors, we would put measures in place to ensure that women have access to safe working environments. Women have, living wages. Women have social protection measures. Women are also, included and protected by the labor laws. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Most companies would go for, I would say cheap labor because it gives them, high profits. And because of that, who is in the cheap labor? It's women, because they are the majority within the informal sector. So those are the things that we need to put in place to ensure that, it's not rocket science, but yes, if you put decent work measures or observe the principles of decent work, you would actually be upholding women's rights and thereby also now upholding the human rights.
Let's talk about how we actually deal with this issue. I heard a woman put it this way, that women are walking into workplaces that have been designed for their fathers, right? And so these are structural, institutional issues that we're dealing with. How do we begin to dismantle those systems, if you will?
One of the things is, first of all, understanding, the demographics of the employees that we have. How many companies have gender disaggregated data? And I say this because women are not a homogeneous, lot. They come with different, or they're faced by different intersectionalities. Some are uneducated, some come from different religions. There's aspects of age, there's aspects of whether you're, married or single. All those aspects present different ways in which women can be discriminated. And it's very, important that employees gather this data and they're able to understand what are these women, exposed to. The other thing is just around also dismantling the harmful social norms that we uphold as a country and, as a citizenry. We have normalized sexual violence. It's become a norm, and people, and we also have this, cultural should I say, practice of victim shaming and blaming people who have gone through gender-based violence. It is not, the responsibility is placed on the survivor and not on the perpetrator. That is a common thing. And this is one of the things that, stops women from actually reporting such incidences. So we need to change our mindset. We need to change how we also perceive work that women do. And the other thing that we need to do is also ensure that we have grievance mechanisms in place that respond to the needs of the different groups that are employed, and more specifically women. We can't have like a grievance committee that is made up of men and you expect that women will report, sexual violation cases. They will not be able to do that. They need to also be confidential. I wouldn't report if I know that the next thing the whole world will know that I went through a sexual violation. So those are things that we need to change within the systems and structures of institutions to be able to, bring women to a place where they would be comfortable to report such incidences, and also ensure that we have mechanisms that actually are functional. It's one thing to have a grievance mechanism. It's another thing to have a functional grievance mechanism that addresses, these violations. How many companies have data of, how many cases they have received, how many have been resolved, and how many are still pending? If you ask for this data, you will not get it because nobody is collecting this data. But this is one of the, key fundamental things of a functional grievance mechanism.
Yeah. Look, what happens after 16 days of activism? And I know 16 days is symbolic, and it's all, it's known worldwide. But what happens after 2 weeks and 2 days?
The sad part is that we all go back to our, workplaces and, business and forget about it and wait for November again to start. But this shouldn't be the case. The 16 days of activism, is used to amplify, initiatives and ways in which we can end violence against women, but this should continue throughout the year because gender-based violence does not wait for November. It happens every day. Women are exposed to it every day. So after the 16 days of activism, we need to continue with any initiatives that will work towards the prevention and ending violence against women. We need to invest time, we need to invest resources, we need to still continue amplifying the voices of the survivors.
All right, Blandina, before I let you go, I have one last question, and it's on money. We talk about the gender wage gap quite a bit. At least in Kenya, the statistic is women make 68 shillings for every 100 shillings that men make. But I can only imagine what that gap looks like in the informal sector, for instance. So how do we begin to address that issue, especially for women who are not protected by structures, if you will?
The first thing is to ensure that we move away from engaging women informally. They need to be contracted. If you have a contract, it has clear terms and conditions of your engagement, and you're able to demand for your rights. And this also includes the wages that you're being paid. You can go to court and say, I'm not being paid based on the living wage. Without a contract, you have nothing to actually use, to demand for your rights. The other thing that also needs to be done to ensure that, we reduce this living wage is ensure that there's representation of women across the value chain in different spaces. We can't have, just men making decisions for women in the boardrooms without understanding their needs. So it is very important in all decision-making spaces, women are represented, the voices of women are heard, and not just to tick boxes, that if they do participate in any conversations, their opinions are actually taken into consideration and they inform decisions that any institution makes towards, achieving gender equality.
All right, Blandina Bobson, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's Blandina Bobson. She's the Director of Programs at Oxfam International Kenya.
All right, heading to a break.
Let's do that. What do you say?
Yep.
Plenty more ahead, folks. Sports news. All the latest from the world of sports coming up in a short while.